Now, if you're already saying, but you don't understand how hard my life is, I want to stop you right there. I want to discuss a topic that may provoke a lot of strong emotions, and that's okay, it's intended to, especially if you are a member of the Generation Z, which, if you were born between 1997 and 2012, this will be mainly for you. Pay attention, because this is some really interesting stuff and some even juicier statistics. We're going to look at some hard truths. And yes, they may be tough to hear. These statistics are saying that 98% of Generation Z workers are feeling burnt out. Yeah, that's 98% of Gen Z workers are burnt out. That's almost 100% of everybody born between those years, right? So nearly every single person in Gen Z currently is burnt out. That's outstanding. Now the question is, have you ever worked with anybody who is burnt out like all the time, and you're asking yourself, my gosh, how are you burnt out? You're young. How could you be this burnt out? According to a recent survey, 23% of Gen Z workers face unimaginable stress. And 48% feel drained at work. That's an alarming amount of people being drained and stressed. Gen Z is officially the most stressed out generation of all time. Now, when employers of 1,000 of them were asked about hiring Gen Z workers and Gen Z graduates, their feedback was really alarming. 6 in 10 employers reported firing recent Gen Z hires within months of hiring them. And 75% of employers found that some or all of Gen Z hires were unsatisfactory.
And on a weekends, they schedule me the entire day, open to close. I'm on the schedule for 8.5 hours.
So basically, everyone that they're hiring nowadays isn't cutting it. They're just not proving themselves to be a commodity in the workforce. This is really alarming. Now, why is that? You have to wonder why this generation of people are like that. Now, 50% of these companies said that Gen Z employees lack motivation. 39% pointed to poor communication skills, and they cited that 46% of these Gen Zers lack professionalism. These are not small issues, you guys. These are fundamental skills that you need to have in the workforce to survive it in a long time frame, or at least to be able to make it to be qualified to getting a raise. So these skills for survival in the workforce, essentially Gen Zers do not have, and they don't possess attributes that speak to longevity. That's insane. So Gen Zers, simply put, are ill-equipped to survive in a professional environment. Whoa. Now, if you are part of this generation, it is important to recognize that while burnout and stress are serious challenges, there is also a clear need to address how you should approach your jobs. So let's start by sharing with you a personal experience of mine, one that actually many of you can probably relate to. Now, I have this coworker, and I'm sure many of you have had the same coworker who constantly complains about never having enough money. This coworker of mine, although she complained about not having money, she always had the latest gadgets, had all the newest clothes, shoes, and when I asked her about this, she simply shrugged her shoulder and said, well, what's the point of saving? You only live once, and tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Which I get it. Sure, tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Now, let me tell you why this particular mindset is really quite dangerous. So I need you to put yourself into the perspective of a little bit of history here. Now, imagine if the great minds and leaders throughout history thought the way that my coworker did, it would be devastating to the future. If the people in the past only focused on indulging in the moment, nothing in this world, nothing would have ever been built. Nothing worthy, at least. Rome wouldn't have been constructed, ancient Greece wouldn't have ever flourished, and the United States wouldn't exist today the way that it does, if at all. Every great civilization, every monumental achievement truly was born out of sacrifice, discipline, and foresight. These people didn't squander their resources on fleeting pleasures. No, our founding fathers invested in infrastructure, in things that instead lasted and stood the test of time. It's through these sacrifices that legendary wealth and legacies were built. Now, I get it. We may not be building empires as individuals, but we are building something even more important, a legacy. And that legacy is defined by the foundations we leave for those around us. Our children, our loved ones, and our future generations. Take my coworker and me, for example. We both have children, but unlike her, I don't just think about today. I think about the future. If she continues to spend recklessly without saving for a rainy day, she'll have nothing to pass down if something were to happen to her. No safety net, no security for her children, no legacy. And frankly, I can't stand that kind of thinking. It's not just about what we build for ourselves, but what we leave behind for others to build upon. That's the real mark of a well-lived life. One that isn't self-centered, but instead with regard to the community around you. Now, let's talk about stress. There are 4 types of stress: real, imaginary, exaggerated, and influenced. Real stress is what generations before us truly went through. Surviving the Great Depression, living through wars, losing family members at a young age. That's real, undeniable stress. But much of the stress that Gen Z experiences falls in the other categories. Imaginary stress is the what if scenarios. What if I fail? What if things go wrong? This is anxiety that you create and formulate internally in your mind. Exaggerated stress happens when a minor issue, like a breakup or being passed over for a promotion, feels like the end of the world. And finally, there is influenced stress. The media or social platforms like TikTok, Instagram. Okay, I'll be there, son. Okay, I'll be there. Okay, I'll be there, baby. I'll be right back. And all these other social media platforms convince you that you should be more anxious and more stressed out than you really need to be. People are constantly comparing themselves to what they see. People project. What they don't have is what they want. Who they are not is who they want to be. This is a dangerous thing to be a part of, and we're right in the middle of it. And technology is skyrocketing people's, well, depressed agendas. It's forced upon them by social media and really the genius of marketing. So think about it. How much of your stress is truly real? And how much of your stress is really imaginary or even exaggerated? Now, if you're already saying, but you don't understand how hard my life is, I want to stop you right there. Okay, you're trying to sell yourself and others the idea that life is difficult. That mindset right there isn't gonna get you anywhere, because fact check, life is hard, it's difficult, it's arduous, it sometimes can be treacherous, but it's life, it's part of it. And this generation simply does not know how to cope with that truth. So instead, we need to acknowledge that much of what you're feeling is influenced by external factors like social media, friends, and sometimes even well-meaning parents. This is crucial because 98% of Gen Z is experiencing burnout, and many of you are being influenced to think that avoiding hardship is the key to happiness. But unfortunately, avoiding stress and suffering is not the answer. It's not. And here's a tough pill to swallow. 57% of Generation Z aspires to be social media influencers. Many believe that this is the ideal pathway. There is this constant requirement to come up with new content all the time, and there's a lot of times this inability to disconnect from your devices. These influencers are burnt out because there is an immense amount of pressure to keep up with all that is being influenced to us. The desire to be an influencer isn't actually easy. It's a path for a few and not for most. That's just the hard truth of that. And honestly, unless you fit into that category, it's definitely not a sustainable one. So to those of you who are considering a career as an influencer or who feel overwhelmed by the challenges in their life right now, I ask you to reflect if being an influencer is something that you actually want to do. So the question you have to ask yourself is, are you actually interested in, well, really anything? It doesn't even have to be being an influencer, just really anything. Or are you obsessed? Because to be honest, it's the people who are obsessed that make it through, because if you're interested, you have to try. That's like a prerequisite before you become interested. But if you are obsessed, you don't have to try. It's almost like automatic. It's well ingrained into your system, or those of you who have that obsession. And I'm not even saying that obsession is good, because it's actually not, but you have to have that edge of obsession to succeed really in this very competitive world that we are living in currently. And that itself has a lot to do with the stress that people are feeling because it's very competitive. Media has subconsciously influenced all of us, whether you know this or not, to kind of keep up with the Joneses. It's a thing. It's subconscious. It's constantly playing, and you may not know it, but it's real. And we're constantly fighting this psychological battle daily. That's the power of marketing. And to be fair, can you blame marketers? It's their job. So the only way that you will really make it is if you push through hard times, realize that times are actually hard. And again, I hate to say this because it's said a lot, but we are in the easy times creates weak men portion of that old adage. So we are fighting against the grain, but there is certainly a good head on your shoulder to sit atop to get in front of all this. So just know that these external forces are against you, and part of the problem is simply recognizing it. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys checking out my new YouTube channel. It's new for me. I'm passionate about life, politics, media, and technology. So a few videos will roll out in the next few weeks about pretty much all these different things. I like testy topics, and I especially like to push the envelope on ideas that are not so popular. But leave comments down below if you find this video interesting, or if you don't, it's fine. And some suggestions. I'd like to take suggestions. If you guys want to hear me talk about anything specific or in particular, let me know. I'd love to dive into them.